Good morning, Warzone kids. Man, is it a nice morning on the trail to the western lands in Vermont. It is 28 degrees. Wow. That counts as springtime. I don't even know why I'm wearing long breeches. The shorts and Birkenstock weather. Warzone kids is my term for those of us like myself. I'm a child sex abuse survivor. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic, to use clinical language. Warzone kids is my term for those of us like myself whose childhoods resembled a guerrilla war against our psyche, our soul. They were more like a guerrilla war and less like a supportive nursery, like a plant that gets sunshine and light and consistent temperature and humidity and soil and everything it needs to grow and blossom. When you had a war zone childhood, you got too much of some stuff and not enough of something else. That might be sexual abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, or harm. I use those words more than abuse. Societal harm, racial harm. Maybe you're just kind of like the wrong type of person according to the people around you. And that made your life into a war zone. Or maybe like my favorite UFC fighter, Khamzat Chimaev, maybe you were an actual war zone kid. He grew up in Chechnya, in Grozny in the 90s, in a war zone. Lost his father there, an actual war zone kid with physical trauma of war. Whatever the case, if you had a war zone childhood, by the time you're an adult, your psyche is like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I think of our soul, our psyche, our self, as a Jenga tower. At the beginning of the game, it's a solid block of wood made up of smaller pieces. It's a whole made up of pieces. There's a Greek word for that, cosmos. A whole made up of parts. With each turn in the game of Jenga, you slide out one of the small blocks and you put it on top. And if you had a war zone childhood, all the harm, abuse, and neglect of your childhood were like turns in that Jenga game. And every Jenga game ends the same way. It ends when that tower collapses. And by the time you're an adult war zone kid, you got a leaning tower of war zone. It's a tall, swaying, tottering thing. And you can end up living your whole adult life geared, oriented around the need to keep that tower from falling down. Well, what I can tell you, as a guy whose tower has fallen down several times, is it's okay. When your tower falls down, now you don't have to worry about your tower falling down. It doesn't happen. When you hit rock bottom, at least you can finally put your feet under you and stand up. And I think of life as a project of getting our Jenga towers back where they belong, whole. I think of the western lands as a place of peace and wholeness where we learn and become what we are. And life is a pilgrimage to the western lands. And a pilgrimage is itself an act of devotion. Very little difference between the journey and the destination when you're on the pilgrimage. And that is how I see life itself. Life itself for us Warzone kids is in the present moment, in the here and now. And that is a question that we all have to ask ourselves. How do we live? There's a Greek phrase for that too. Pois boiton. How do we live? How do we live? Our life is right here and now, the ground in front of our feet. The part of the trail that matters the most is the step you're taking on it right here and now. The past is like a log of wood that you can drag around with you if you want. You can try to carve that log of wood into a key that will unlock your happiness, but it ain't never gonna work. And you can live your life like a young hunter, looking always in the future, looking around the next bend in the road for the happiness that awaits you there, and you ain't never gonna get there. That is a characteristic of the next bend in the road. It is always the next bend in the road. That is why I do not consider myself to be a seeker, because it is in the nature of a seeker to always seek and never to find. I'm a pilgrimage. I'm a pilgrim on a pilgrimage. The pilgrimage is life itself, and I'm on that trail right now. Life is in the here and now. The only step on the trail I can take is one right in front of my left foot. I put my left foot down, then I put my right foot down. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, left foot and right foot. Last couple videos I made, I think were kind of somber in tone, maybe melancholy, because they're about intergenerational abuse and harm. And I used an image of vampires. How does a vampire get made? By another vampire. How does that vampire get made? By another vampire. Well, the first vampire came from somewhere. And intergenerational abuse, intergenerational harm, that kind of thing, that refers to the way that we can pass this abuse down from one generation to the next. And if you're a war zone kid and the phrase intergenerational abuse means anything to you, then you probably know what I'm talking about. And my somber, melancholy tone when I talk about that, I think if you're a war zone kid that has children yourself, I think you can relate. Because if you're a war zone kid and you have kids yourself and you're watching this video, then you're on your own trail to the Western lands, however you think of that. You don't have to think of it how I do. That's just how I think of it. And I wanted, first time I started thinking about intergenerational abuse, I wanted it to be true that I was the end of it. I was the last one. I ended it. Because, man, that feels good. That feels good to my psyche. I ended it. Well, I'll tell you something, boys and girls. I have 4 children, and I love them all more than I love anything else in this cosmos. And it matters a lot to me to try and do my best to stare at the direct sun of reality. Rosy-fingered dawn is coming up, and the sun comes with her. And the sun is the direct experience of the cosmos. And it is just a fact of the world that I passed on intergenerational harm to my kids. Not in the same ways that it was passed on to me, but in my own way. I had a psyche shaped by psychological, emotional abuse and neglect and harm. I had to reflect my folks back to them. That was the only thing that mattered in my life. I had to keep them happy by giving them the kid that they wanted to see, which was not me. And I learned to put my own psyche off to the side. That's my experience. And so the more I face reality about my own life and my own existence with my kids, there are 3 of them are adults now. One's fixing to be in the next couple years. And they're beautiful children. And they're doing very well for themselves in life. And I did a lot of things much better than were done to me. And there are a lot of kinds of harm and abuse that they did not experience. I know this. But I did not rear them. They were not reared by a guy with a stable, solid Jenga tower. They were reared by this guy. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. And if you look at the checklist for those items in the DSM, and you look at the comorbidities of those things, it ain't no surprise at all that I was not the world's most stable, serene father. I was not. I loved them. I had very good intentions. And so does everyone. Intentions don't mean a dag-nab thing to those around you. All they have to deal with is what you actually did. Intergenerational abuse, left foot, right foot. So I'm going to tell you the story today of Grandpa Abram and the well. This isn't a made-up story. These are factual events. They occurred. And Grandpa Abram, in some ways, was the founding vampire in one strand of the intergenerational abuse in my life. And Grandpa Abram is a titan to this guy. A titan. You look in Greek mythology, the titans were these figures from the dim mist of time, way back. There's not that many real firm, concrete stories about titans, the way there are stories about Persephone and Demeter and Heracles and Prometheus. Was Prometheus a titan? Maybe he was. Sorry. I always had a real hard time memorizing Greek myths. But Grandpa Abram was a titan, my mother's father. My grandfather, he was born, this is a true story. This is absolutely a true story. Grandpa Abram, my grandfather was born in 1891. Now I'm a 51-year-old Gen Xer from Oklahoma. I was born in 1974. Grandpa Abram, my grandfather, was born in 1891 in Locust Fork, Alabama, in Blount County. He may not have been born in Locust Fork, but he was born in Blount County, Alabama. And it's hot there. I've been there. The sun pushes down on you. There's fire ants. And he grew up on what you call a yeoman farm, a farm big enough to support a family. His family was him and his folks, and he had 5 sisters. He was born in 1891. In what year was it? He's 15, so that'd have been in 1905 or 1906. He's digging a well with his father, a dug well. Dig it with shovels. It's hard work, but they got it done because the world is hard work, manual labor on a farm. Go back to Hesiod in the works and days in ancient Greece. The life of the farmer is one of unremitting effort and toil. The work has to get done or you will not eat. It has to get done. And farmers that live are farmers that adjust themselves to a life where it has to get done. It don't matter why. It doesn't matter what's wrong. It has to get done. You got to get it done. It don't matter how sick you are. It don't matter if your leg hurts. It don't matter if you got a headache and you didn't have enough breakfast that morning. It's got to get done or you ain't going to have nothing to eat in the wintertime. It's got to get done. That's a lifestyle. Think of the human character that lifestyle forms. They're out there digging that well, and when you get down past a certain distance, the well ain't big enough for 2 people to dig at one time. So Grandpa Abram was up top, and his old man was down in the bottom of that well. And Grandpa Abram's up there, and the sound of the shovel stopped. He called down in that well, and there weren't no answer. He called again, and there weren't no answer. He shone a light down there, and all he saw was the crumpled form of his old man in the bottom of that well, smothered by a pocket of methane gas, a known hazard of digging holes in the ground. Can't get out. Think of that. In the darkness of that well, with the light of a lantern, your 15-year-old kid, and all you can see is the crumpled up body of your old man down there. Someone's got to get him out. You may think of law and order, police. That weren't no relevant thing at the time. It weren't no type of relevant thing. There weren't no one to call, and there was no telephone to call them on. You got to get Grandpa Abram had to get his old man's body up out of that well. There weren't no one else to do it. He had to get it up. It had to get done. That's the well. That's where they had to get their water from. You can't drink no water out of a well that's got your dead old man in the bottom of it. So we had to get him up. Think of that. It ain't easy to move a dead body. He had to get it up out of that well. He had to heave it up. He got the old man's body up out of that well, dragged it up. Think of that. Grandpa Abram, 15 years old, in that moment. Just him and his old man's body, and the fading daylight, and the farm, and the chores that still had to get done that night before he went to bed. there were still chores he had to get done. And on top of them chores, he had an old man to bury. And he had a mother. And he had 5 sisters. And he was then the pater familias. He was the man of the house. You can think whatever you like about society, but at that time, that meant something. He was the man of the house. He had a mother and he had 5 sisters, and there was a farm, and there were chores to get done. And there was a cow to get in, and there were chickens to close up. There was a hog to feed. There were chores to be done, and there was an old man to get buried. And Grandpa Abram put his left foot in front of his right foot, and he raged. I'm sure he did. He's a human being. He must have raged and gone numb and put his left foot down in front of his right foot, and then his right foot down in front of his left foot, and then his left foot down in front of his right foot. And he got through the rest of that day. And he got through the next day living in a dreamland. Many of you have known days like that in your life when something happened to you and you were living in a dreamland. The dreamland that was your real life. And the real life that went on around you felt like a dream. Many of you have woken up on the day after the worst day of your life. If you're a war zone kid, your life may have had so much chronic abuse and neglect that individual days, if you can even remember them, just blend together. But many of you had something happen to you, maybe as an adult or as an adolescent. Maybe life was fine till it weren't, and you had a day that it happened. You may have had many days that it happened. Well, the sun came up on that day, and you put your left foot in front of your right foot, and you got through that day, and you got through the next day, or you wouldn't be here. Grandpa Abram put his left foot in front of his right foot, and he got through that day, and he got through the next day. And whether he knew it or not, rosy-fingered dawn came up in the east on that next morning, and she was there, and he got through that next day putting his left foot in front of his right foot, and he got through the rest of his life putting his left foot in front of his right foot. And I don't believe that Grandpa Abram's life ever particularly got any easier than that. He was born in 1891. World War I came along, and he went and fought in it. And he was a devoutly religious man. And despite the insistence of some religious folks on the eternal, unchanging nature of their values, at that time, he was a devout Christian man. And his church, I believe he may have been a Methodist. I'm not sure, and I'm sorry if I'm defaming your memory, Grandpa Abram. Maybe he's a Baptist. But his church took a stance against the war, and he joined the army as a conscientious objector. And he went to World War I as a conscientious objector. And he carried messages on a mule. Think of that. On a mule. He's a messenger, carrying messages back and forth on the front lines, from the command to the front line, back and forth on a mule. And he told a story of how there was shelling going on, and he couldn't get that mule to run. See, mules are smart critters. They move at their own pace. He could not make that mule run. It walked. And so there's shelling going on all around him, and that mule just loping along in his own sweet time. I think about that. Well, he survived that war, and he got back home, and he did about every kind of job there was. He worked in coal mines, got black lung. But he spent most of his life farming. He spent most of his life putting his left foot in front of his right foot, the life of the farmer, where everything just had to get done. He had 8 children. He had a brief stint working in a store. Easy money. I mean, easy money. You're telling me that I show up at this hardware store and some people come in buying stuff and they hand me some money and I hand them a pouch of nails and then I get a paycheck for it? That ain't nothing next to the life of a farmer. But he only lasted a couple days in that job in the hardware store because he could not abide another man telling him what to do. Could not stand it. He said, I ain't cut out for this. I'm going back to the farm. Grandpa Abram was an ornery man. And orneriness is the cardinal virtue of my family. Ornery, like that mule. You can shell me all you want. I'm going to walk at my own pace. That mule put 2 left feet in front of 2 right feet. Ornery. You can't make a mule do something it don't want to do. You couldn't make Grandpa Abram do something he didn't want to do. And whatever it is he had to do to get done, whatever it was he had to get done, that's what he did. And that's what he got through. And he had 8 children. And each and every one of them will tell you, he was hard as nails. How could he not be? Think of that life. Now, he's 55 years old when my mother was born. She's his last child, a girl on the farm. He was 55 years old. I'm 51. When Grandpa Abram was my age, he still had 3 more kids coming. I've had 4. And I can tell you right here and now, I cannot easily imagine the notion that at 51 years old, I might be working on a cotton farm, picking cotton and dealing with hogs and chickens and a cow, and fences got to be mended and fields to weed and cotton to chop. I cannot imagine even doing that at my age right now, let alone still having 3 kids yet to be born. He's 55 years old when my mother was born. Since the age of 15, 40 solid years, he'd been putting his left foot in front of his left foot in front of his right foot and getting done whatever had to get done in front of him. He was a man hard as nails by then. And I knew all of his children. My older uncles were born in the 20s, in the 1920s. They fought in World War II. My mother was born in 1946. He was born in 1891. I was his grandson. I never met him. He died 10 years before I was born. But he was a titan. He was the titan of the dim, mythic past, my childhood. I saw him reflected in each of his 8 children, and they were all ornery. They were all ornery, and they all got the job done. They all knew how to put their left foot in front of their right foot, and they were all hard as nails. And they all went through life with the stamp of Grandpa Abram, and they stamped that stamp on all their kids. I got a lot of far-flung cousins. Left foot, right foot. Vampires that have to be buried, have to sleep in the soil of their homeland. Harm passed down from generation to generation. The harm in this case, really, is the harm of the man who was that traumatized boy, hard as nails. Think of the world he lived in, a hard, pitiless world. And he lived in it, and he slogged it out, left foot, right foot. He died in 1965. He died in a hospital, in a VA hospital. Died in the night. Uncle of mine went in there the next day. The fella that Grandpa Abram shared a hospital room with, another old fella, another World War I vet, called over to my uncle, said, it weren't right what happened to Abram. It weren't right what they did. Well, what'd they do? It weren't right what they did. He had water in his lung. He had fluid in his lung. And he needed to sit up to breathe. He kept sitting up. Nurse came in and told him to lay down. He was making too much trouble. He couldn't breathe when he was laying down. Nurse came in, told him, lay down. It's bedtime. You got to lay down. He said, I can't breathe if I'm laying down. That nurse tied him down. Just like that other vet was tied down. That nurse tied Grandpa Abram down to his bed, and that's where he died, drowned in the fluid in his own lung, tied to his bed. And that's how his life ended, as hard as it began. So he was a man hard as nails, and he raised kids to live in that world. My mother's driving a tractor by the time she's 4, something like that. And he taught them all, he put them all to work hard when they were very young. Why? He remembered what his life was like when he was 15 years old, and he had to do everything. And he did not want his children to have to suffer as much as he did, because he knew there weren't no telling what might happen to him. He knew that the cosmos is a hard place, and only the ornery survive. Only the hard survive. And he stamped that stamp on his kids, and they stamped it. They didn't know any kindness, except from their mother, but they were reared by that Titan, hard as nails, pitiless, ruthless. But he always got the job done. At the end of the day, the day's work was always done. That's the mythical figure for this guy. I grew up hearing about Grandpa Abram in the well and pondering on that man. And thinking about orneriness as a cardinal virtue. And wondering how that was stamped on me, and how I've stamped that on my children somehow. It ain't exactly the same, it's different, but it's related. There's a kinship between it. They say in the world of intergenerational abuse, the child of the tiger is born with stripes. Is that good? Is that bad? That's how it is. Ain't tigers supposed to have stripes? Well, I ponder on Grandpa Abram, and I think about putting my left foot down in front of my right foot on the trail to the Western Lands. That's how I live now, pilgrim on the trail to the Western Lands. Put my left foot down in front of my right foot, living in the here and now. And also living with stories of titans of the past. Grandpa Abram has hardly ever, there probably hadn't been a day gone by I haven't thought about Grandpa Abram like in my conscious life. But I'll tell you what, boys and girls, I don't really feel today like it's a trudge to put my left foot in front of my right foot. There have been long stretches of my life when it was. But there's also days where putting your left foot in front of your right foot is dancing and skipping and sauntering and galloping like that mule didn't do. Sometimes life feels like a trudge, but not always, and not today. Today is a beautiful day on the trail to the Western Lands. We can get in a lot of miles. Let's dance them together, Pilgrim. Day lies burning.